Good evening, all. Thanks for joining us. Hello, everyone. There's just a few people in the waiting room, so I'm just going to admit them first, and we'll probably start in about 1 minute.
Is mine on?
Yes,
can you hear that?
I mute you. Right, I think that's everyone at the moment. So everyone, thank you for joining us this evening to talk about cricket outfields and drainage. I know a topic that both Alex and Ian are very passionate about. So tonight we've got joining us Ian Mather-Brewster from the Grounds Management Association and Alex Vickers, a specialist in outfield and drainage maintenance. So I'm going to hand you over to both Ian and Alex for the remainder of the evening. And then if you have any questions at the end, please feel free to pop them in the chat, or we can answer any questions at the end. We do hope to be finished by 6:45 to give you some of the evening time back tonight. The session is also being recorded, so there's no need to take as many notes as you may feel that you need to. We'll send the recording out early next week. So Ian and Alex, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Victoria. Good evening, everyone. Like Victoria just said, Alex and I will be going through, mainly Alex, going through outfield drainage, what to do, what it means, how to solve it, how to identify it. Do you want to continue from there, Alex? And then
yeah, that's good. But feel free to pipe in at any time, Ian.
I will do. Don't worry. You know I'm not scared of doing that.
No, indeed. Yeah. Good. Great. Thanks for joining us, everyone who's here. I know outfields drainage is a big topic. It's one of those things that it's very easy to spend a lot of money on drainage, and you might not always get the result that you want. So what I'm going to try and do tonight is kind of cover the bases, and I'm going to start off with the really, really simple stuff that might avoid the need for a drainage system altogether. Just to kind of put this into some context, I've just come back from some field work over in Cheltenham. Not a million miles from Wales. Obviously, it's not Wales, but it's not a million miles away. And in the aftermath of the incredibly dry summer we've had, I've been on site after site after site with huge cracks along drainage runs. And these drains, looking at them, probably about 30 years old. And some of the sites, people have said, well, we didn't know there were drains here. We've never seen them before. But this dry weather has resulted in significant cracking, which is delaying the use of these pitches. So drainage can be really helpful, but it does come at a cost, not just in terms of the initial cost of putting the blooming drains in, but also the ongoing maintenance costs. And it's one of those things that you really have to think about the project long and hard before you commit to it. And hopefully that will come out as we go. So Ian, can you knock us on?
Yeah, certainly.
So, like I said, I'm going to start right at the beginning, at the most simple things. There's nothing more annoying. Just for your background, is I'm a volunteer groundsman, probably like some of you guys. I've got my own little square, my own little ground. And there's nothing more annoying than on sort of like 5 to 11 on a Saturday morning, the umpire's walking around and they start going on about a little wet area in the outfield. And, you know, they're treading on it with the shoes, and there's a little bit of water coming up and they're concerned about it. And you dig into it and it's literally just water held in the thatch. But because it's coming up around the shoes, they get all shirty, and actually our game's lost because of that, even though the soil underneath is completely bone dry. And so key basic thing is to manage the thatch in your outfield. Yeah, being a very old cricketer now, I like a bit of thatch in my outfield if I've got to throw myself around, to be honest. The spongier, the better. But it does come with a downside. And so scarification and sort of working hard to keep the thatch down to a sensible level is great as a way of sort of minimizing those annoying issues where you've had a bit of shower of rain overnight or a bit of rain in the morning before, and it's just sat in that thatch layer, it's dry underneath, it's sat in that thatch layer, and you've got an annoying umpire who doesn't really appreciate what the issue is. So again, I don't know how many of you will do this regularly, but scarifying, or even if you can't afford to scarify, getting hold of a good grass harrow from a farmer or something like that, and just pulling a grass harrow through it in early spring, really ripping it out, making it look rubbish for a couple of weeks, but it'll come back so well. My club's not got a huge amount of money, so this is how we do things. We try and make do the best we can. But thankfully, we've got a local farmer with a grass harrow who will come and do it for us. So it's just thinking around those sort of things, or borrow a quadruplane from a local football club or something like that. Use your contacts, but get that thatch out, reduce the amount of thatch in there, and that will solve some of the problems. It won't solve all of the problems. Thanks, Ian.
I can honestly say that I would say about 80% of all inquiries we get about drainage and outfields is related to thatch and the thatch layer. It's usually maintenance that is the issue, not the actual fact that the water's going through the soil. So I would actually say that. I mean, we use chain arrows for years on my cricket outfield, because not everybody can afford to scarify. So just get it raked, basically.
Yeah.
But right, I'll move on.
The next one, again, is another dead obvious one. It's surface levels. A lot of outfields, certainly I play on and that you see around, you've got lots of little deviations in there. They wobble around, particularly if you're on a clay soil. Clay soils tend to move over the course of 10 years anyway, and you'll get some undulations moving around, particularly if they shrink and swell when they're wet and dry. You'll see from that photo there how the water is just sitting in those low spots. How do you deal with that? Well, the best way, I mean, there's a few ways. If it's a really major issue for you, then you can, go expensive. You can take the grass off, you can cultivate the outfield, you can get it to a nice even fall, working around your square. That's possible, but it's expensive, 30, 40 grand to do an outfield like that. You have to do it in September, so there's a risk it might not be ready for the following season. You could, if you wanted to, if you've got a persistent wet spot, look to put a drain in there. And that might help you with an ad hoc one-off drain. And that can be done quite cheaply. And we'll talk about drains in a minute. But the other thing you could consider is regular, just as you would on the square, to maintain levels on your square with your top dressing in the autumn, look at these low patches and top dress them out with sand. What you need to do is just have a proper straight edge, like a loop, exactly like you would on your square, and then just dress them. And it might take 2 or 3 years of putting sand down at 3, 4, 5 millimeters a go, working it hard into the depression under a long straight edge, 2 meters, 3 meters straight edge, something like that. A set of ladders tied together, work it around under a set of ladders, pull the ladders around so that you're working it from the high areas to the low areas. And over time, you'll dress out those low spots. And again, it's sort of a more affordable option for reducing the problems that you get caused by these low spots with water just sitting in them for ages and ages and ages. There's nothing more annoying, is there, than having an outfield that is 95% ideal and 5% of it stops again. So yeah, just consider that one as well as an option. And then coupled with this is also, regular decompaction. I don't know how many of you get your outfield decompacted regularly, but verti-draining it, we tend to get ours done every spring if we can afford it, and we can't always afford it. But that will just help relieve compaction. And that's what I'm coming on to next. So Ian, can you pop us on? So compaction looks, a lot of people say to me, how do I know if I've got a compacted soil? The best thing to do is dig a hole. And particularly, it's probably at the moment, if you try and dig a hole, even in Wales, it's going to be dry and hard and it feel hard. But if you do this in the spring, if you're struggling to get your spade through a layer, that might be due to compaction. The other thing to look out for is that horizontal rooting. You see in the photograph there, there's horizontal rooting. So what you've got is you've got about, 2.5 inches of half decent soil at the top, and then a very distinct compacted layer. And the grass roots are spreading out across the top of that. And what you'll also see in the soil, and you probably see it there, the soil looks like you've got these horizontal layers in there. You'll see cracks running horizontally across it. and you'll see chunks of soil, and it looks like there's a series of plates stacked on top of each other. It's called platy structure. It's a dead giveaway. You'll see it if you've got compaction in your outfield. And this can be enough to create massive issues with water, even in sandy soils. Ian, can you knock us on? I'll explain that a little bit more. So here's it's a compacted rugby pitch, but it could easily be a cricket outfield. Again, you see that sort of lack of structure in the soil. So there's horizontal layers that are in there, caused by play. It could be caused by machinery and equipment. If you're a cricket club where people park their cars around the boundary, then the cars traveling over the outfield will do this absolutely brilliantly. And a lot of people think that compacted soils really only relate to clay soils, but it's simply not true. Clay soils rarely compact to this extent. The most prone to compaction are sandy loam soils or loamy sand soils. So if you've got an outfield which is sand dominated and it's not draining very well, chances are compaction is the cause. And that's why things like verti-draining operations and this sort of stuff should be part of your renovation program, like I say, if you can afford it. Ian, can you sort of move on? I think this is to sort of illustrate what the difference is. You've got two little microscopic slides of soil here. The first one is at a compaction of around about 1.5 grams per centimetre square. The second one with much smaller pore space. You can see the big pores have disappeared. That's at a compaction level of 1.55. Sorry, can you go back up? So we've got a so first one 1.5, second one 1.55. It's a minimal difference in compaction in terms of actual density, but look at the difference in pore sizes. And if that's in the surface sort of 100 mil of your outfield, that will significantly reduce the infiltration rates and can lead to standing water for periods of time, particularly if you're on sandy soils. So just bear that one in mind. Yeah, cheers, Ian. Here's a perfect example, sandy loam. This is why sandy loam soils, sand-dominated soils, have the problem. The majority of the material in the soil, the sand grains, you know, there's big grains there, that's fine. But because they're big grains, they've got quite a lot of pore space between them, just enough for the silt and the clay particles, those much smaller particles, to cram in between the big particles. And that's what causes your compaction. In clay particles, it doesn't really work that way. They're all tiny. And because they typically shrink and swell when they get wet and dry, they relieve compaction themselves. Have you ever wondered why you have to roll your square every spring? Well, it's because your square is made out of clay loam soil, and that clay loam soil swells in winter when it gets wet. And because it swells in winter when it gets wet, it self-decompacts, which means come the spring, you have to put the compaction back into it. And that is literally the only benefit of having a clay outfield, is that it self-decompacts. So you won't really need to do this much. A bit of slitting is good as well to help clay. But if you've got a sandy loam soil or a sand-dominated soil, you really are requiring mechanical decompaction. That's a verti-drain, that's a shock wave or an earthquake or something similar like that. Thanks, Ian. And here's an example. You've probably seen this picture before in various Sport England pictures, but this is an example of a verti-drain. This is how it's working. Tines are going in, it's mimicking a garden fork, and you get the decompaction. But the critical thing to remember about decompaction operations is they only work when the soil is dry. If your soil is wet, you will get zero compaction effect. And I'll illustrate, I think, that on the next slide. So here we go. In an ideal scenario, when the soil is dry, just soft enough to the tine to get to full working depth, then what you're getting is two effects. You're getting the effect of the garden fork. Now, because the soil is dry, it means it fractures easily. And how do you work this out? The simplest way to work out whether the soil is right for verti-draining is to dig a hole, get a handful of that topsoil, and if it crumbles easily in your hand without smearing, it's perfect. If it smears, and so if you're pulling it apart a little bit, and it's smearing and it's still wet, it's no good. And the reason you're getting this is it needs to be dry so that it fractures. If it's too wet, the tines will simply go in, they'll move, and they will smear the soil. that it's a bit like a knife through butter, and you end up with one pore, one big hole where the tine's gone in, and thousands of compaction caused small holes all around the tine itself. So if you imagine that second one where it says too wet, you'll see it's got a little C underneath it for no apparent reason I can remember. If you imagine that tine going in and coming out, what does it leave you? It just leaves you a hole, doesn't it? Now, to create that one big pore, that one hole, what's happened to all the other pores in the soil around? Well, you haven't taken soil away. So what you've done is compressed the soil that was already there. And in that zone around where the tine's been, probably sort of 3-4 millimeters on every side of the tine hole, you've now got compacted soil. And all that's going to do is fill up with water. You've created yourself a nice little rain gauge. You can work out exactly how much water's fallen on your outfield by measuring the amount of water in the hole. If it's dry, something extra happens. The tine goes in and you get a lot of friction between the metal on the tine and the soil. So when the tine pulls out, you get a whole series of additional fracturing. That only happens in dry conditions. So in Wales, when's the ideal time? Well, the best thing to do is to grab a handful of soil and crumble it and then do it. But I do appreciate that if you're relying on a contractor to do this, you have to book the contractor ahead. They can't always respond. They can't always be there straight away. You might be booking them ahead 2-3 weeks in advance. What I would say is wait till later. I don't know what it's about cricket, but we always want to do stuff dead fast, don't we? People, you've seen it on the Facebook pages, people on their rollers in February. What are you doing on your roller in your February? It's just bizarre. Much better off being in the pub or something. Wait until end of April, beginning of May. Wait till you've had 3 or 4 weeks of good dry weather or drying weather, and then do it. You'll get maximum effect. And if you're vertically training with pencil tines or even 20mm tines, you'll still be able to play cricket on it the next day. It won't be an issue. So wait, get maximum effect, because it's not cheap. What's 500 quid to do an outfield, 600 quid? I want maximum benefit from that 600 quid. You get that by waiting. Good. I think I've banged on enough about that. Right, Ian. Next one.
Flood risk.
Flood risk. It might be your outfield is on a point of flood risk. It might be close to a river. It might be on a floodplain, something like that. And that can be incredibly frustrating because there's not much you can do about that. You're not allowed to stop the river flooding. The river has to be able to flood onto your land. You can check whether you're on an official flood risk an official floodplain by going onto the Environment Agency website. Just do a flood risk for planning search in Google, put your postcode in, it'll show you whether you are. If you're on flood zone 2 or flood zone 3 land, you cannot change the level of your land in any way that reduces the flood storage volume. So you are a little bit stymied. You can still drain it, that's not a problem. But what you can't do is raise the level away from the flooding. You can't stop the river flooding over it. And, if you could, Worcester would have done it years ago. But the reason Worcester keeps flooding is they're not allowed to do it. And that would be the same for you. Okay, Ian, let's move on.
Is it true to say, though, Alex, that a lot of cricket grounds were developed on floodplains because the floodplains couldn't be used for anything else? So we have got a lot of grounds. I think the ECB map it, and they have a lot of grounds that are on floodplains, and they try their best to put drainage in, put stuff like that. And I know we were involved in one in Appleby in the Lake District where they had to put a very expensive drainage system in because it floods the ground. The drainage system has to be put in, but it only works when the river isn't so high.
That's exactly it. Yeah, and it is the nature of it. Where's your cheap land? Well, your cheap land's the stuff that sits wet, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's often why cricket clubs, this very close club to me, for some reason they built their first ground floods from the river anyway. And then they built a second ground right next to it in an area that floods even worse. So I'm silly. Yeah, I don't know. They must be masochists or something. I don't understand why they've done it. And you do need, that's what you need to do. You will need to invest in an actual proper, good quality drainage system so that when the flood levels in the river drop, your ground dries as quickly as it possibly can.
Yeah.
And to be honest, there's no way of improving that really with sort of maintenance-based approaches. In that situation, you are needing an actual drainage system. So yeah. So let's talk about big drainage systems. That's surface water flood risk. You can look at your floodplain issues. You can also look at surface water flood risk. This is probably more of an issue if somebody's come along and said they're going to build you a new ground. All right, you know, those fantastic offers that you can't refuse. Developer comes along and says, oh, we want your cricket ground to build houses on. Can we make you a new ground? And it's all very exciting because they want to promise you a new, nice new load of nets and a lovely clubhouse and all that sort of stuff. All I would say is be very, 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 very careful. Do your due diligence. Look at these sort of maps and see what you're letting yourself in for as the start of the issue, really. Ian, yeah, sorry.
Hang on.
The other thing to look at on your ground, and I don't know if many of you do this, it's that easy. If you've got Google Earth Pro, then what you can do, and you can download that for free, it's a free app. You can put your postcode into Google Earth Pro and you can see the aerial photo of your site. And then what you can do is you can click, there's like a little clock symbol on the web browser, on the application, which allows you to go back in time. And what you want to do is go back in time to one of the really dry years. So any photos taken this summer will be brilliant for this. The last one that's probably best is probably about 2019, 2018, 19. Then 2023 wasn't too bad either. That was pretty good. And have a look, because you might be surprised. You may well have a drainage system under your ground. You can see it on this slide. If you look at it carefully, you've got the cricket square standing out. You've got what looks to be an old road or pathway running, just clipping the edge of the cricket square there. And then you've got that herringbone drainage system. You'll see it going roughly north to south, the main collector going north to south. And Ian's just showing you where the lateral drains are that are coming into it. You may have existing drains, and you know what you want to do to start with is have a look at those drains. Do what I tend to do on a regular basis when I'm looking at this. Dig a hole over the drains. Look at the backfill. Is the backfill clean? Is it fresh stone? Is there any soil in there? Dig down to the pipe. What kind of pipe is it? If it's a plastic pipe, it's probably from the 1980s onward. If it's a clay tile, it's from the 70s. If it's got clinker backfill, that's that sort of weird coal-like stuff, then it will probably be 1978 and earlier. If it's a concrete pipe, that will definitely be between 68 and 75. They didn't have long to go. And you can roughly work out what your system is. The next thing to do is look at where that existing system is outfalling. Where does the water go from that system? It will probably end up in a little inspection chamber. Now, it might be you struggle to find your inspection chamber. A lot of them are buried or hidden under undergrowth or stuff like that. But if you can find out where it goes, great. It might go into a ditch. It might go into a stream. There might be a pipe sticking out of a bank. Find the outfall, because if you're considering a new drainage system, one of the critical things you have to make sure will work is it has to have somewhere safe for the water to go. You have to be able to get the water off-site effectively. If you've already got an existing connection to a surface water sewer, you can reuse that connection as long as you don't make the diameter of the connecting pipe any bigger. So if that drain that's on this photo that's going out to the north is, say, a 6-inch pipe, you can reuse that connection to the sewer as long as you don't make it any bigger than 6 inches. I remember doing the drainage system at Bristol. The whole outfield at Bristol drains to one single pipe, which is a clay pipe 6 inches wide, the whole outfield. So we had to put in a massive attenuation system, because you imagine draining an outfield that big and it rains at, say, 50 or 60 millimeters in a day, all that water's going quickly down that pipe. You'd have a huge flooding incident around that pipe. So what we've got at Bristol is massive underground tanks, huge underground tanks that store the water, let it out at a slow rate. But the good thing about having an existing connection, like I say, is you've already got permission to use it. If you've got a new ground or your existing ground, and the only outfall is into a surface water sewer, say a highways drain or something like that, I guarantee you will not get permission to put water into that drain. or it's highly unlikely. It's becoming more and more difficult to put surface water into a highway system or surface water sewer because of the flooding issues that I guess we're all familiar with. So look at your aerial photos. They're really useful. Thanks, Ian. So I've definitely gone on too long about that. Check your drains. Have a look. You'll see that one drain that I've dug out there has got a lovely, clean, sort of small stone. The ideal stone above a pipe in a drain is a 2 to 6 millimeter gravel. The drains I've been digging up in Cheltenham the last couple of days, they've been sort of 15 mil to 100 mil lumps of limestone. Absolute disaster because they've got so many big pores, the soil just washes between them and that backfill stops working. So if you're looking at new drains, backfill. 2 to 6 mil gravel is exactly the right stuff to use. It doesn't block up with soil. It stays working for much, much longer. That drain that you'll see there is probably about 16, 17 years old. And look how clean the gravel is still. And that's in a silty clay. The silt will wash into that. So it really works well. Get down to the pipe. The second photo there, you'll see, you probably just see a sort of, do you see that tuft of terran sticking out? You see the geotextile down there. Hopefully Ian can wobble the mouse around on it. There's a geotextile layer. What they've done is they covered the pipe in geotextile. And when I poured water on this before I dug the hole, water just sat in the hole. So then I cut a hole in the geotextile and the water started to get away. And what had happened is the geotextile had essentially just got full of soil and it wasn't letting any water through. This is a classic civil engineering approach to drainage, where they're typically draining clean water, i.e. a car park or a roof gutter or something like that, and they wrap the pipes in terram or they wrap the trenches in terram to keep them clean. And that's fine because the water's coming in a different way. But if the water's got to move through a soil to get to the pipe, it will start to move silt and clay particles. And when it does that, they will block up your terram and you'll end up with a drain system that is beautifully clean but doesn't work. Thanks, Ian. So water movement in soil, this is a sort of key thing to understand. And I'll talk you through it quickly, but hopefully you'll get my drift. What we've got here in front of you is a tank full of coarse sand. You could use it as a drainage backfill material. All the pores in that sand are bigger than 63 microns. Now, why is that important? Well, any pore in the soil that's smaller than 63 microns there or thereabouts will hold water against the force of gravity. It will not release the water. This sand, all the pores pretty much are larger than 63 microns, which means all the water will be moved by gravity. And you can see that. You see the purple coloured water, we put it in, it's very quickly going straight down through the sand. That's your perfect drainage sand. It's draining quickly, it's draining effectively. Let's move on and have a look at a different issue. Okay. Here, we've got a layer of coarse sand over fine sand, coarse soil over fine soil. And what you're seeing is gravity moving water very quickly through the coarse material. This could be like a sand top dressing on your outfield, for instance. And as soon as it hits that finer soil below, instead of it going straight down, it's now being pulled equally on every side. The reason is that all the pores in that finer sand are smaller than 63 microns. And so gravity is not pulling it down. It's the suction, the capillary forces in the soil, which are pulling the water against the force of gravity to the side. Very often, this is what cricket outfields look like. There's a bit of sand top dressing at the top, and then you get into a clay. And so water will rapidly go down through the sand. It'll hit the clay layer. And over time, maybe 2 or 3 weeks as you're getting into the autumn or early spring, that topsoil layer gets saturated and it takes a while for it to go through. That's quite typical. Ian, let's have a look at another alternative. Here we've swapped it around and now we've put the fine sand over the coarse sand. And remember, because all the pores in that fine sand are smaller than 63 microns, they will not release water under the force of gravity. What's happening to that layer of fine sand? Well, it's saturated, isn't it? Even though it's got this beautiful drainage sand underneath it, which will take water very quickly, water cannot release from the small pores in the fine sand into those bigger pores in the coarser sand, because the capillary forces in that fine sand are so strong, they're holding it against the force of gravity. So let's think about this in terms of drainage. Ian, can you pop that, the next one on? Here's an example. Imagine the gravel that you're seeing in this sand tank. That gravel could have a pipe in the middle of it. Where's the water going? Well, this is in a coarse sand as well, so it's coarse sand and gravel. But look at the water. It's bypassing the drain. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Why is the water going past the drain? Surely the water would go straight down into that gravel in a way. But it's not, because the capillary forces that are holding the water in the sand are stronger than the capillary forces that will accept water into the gravel. So that literally the water will move away from the gravel. It'll go anywhere but into the gravel. And that's even worse if you put a pipe in there. So it's about getting the right design of drain. And unfortunately, I see a lot of drains that are badly designed. They will not take surface water very well. This drain that you're looking at would be brilliant if you've got a shallow water table. So if you've got water coming up from below, from a water table, it'd be great. But for surface water, it's no good. Ian, sorry, can we pop on again?
There you go.
So getting your drainage design is really important. If you've got surface water issues, what you need to do is you need to get your pipe as deep as possible, a minimum of ½ a metre if you can. Have 2 to 6 mil gravel around it, but then at least 150 millimetres of free draining sand above. And that sand has to be exposed at the surface. If you cover it with a layer of soil, then you've got a layer of fine pores over coarse pores, and you just cap your drain off. Honestly, I've been to so many sites with new drainage systems with standing water above the drains because they've capped the drains off with topsoil. These drain systems cost 80, 100 grand, and they're sat there in the soil and no water's coming out because of this capping effect. You've got to have that sand all the way to the surface. How do you know you've got a wet soil? Well, it sounds a stupid thing to say, doesn't it? But, you know, because obviously there's water sat on the top of it. But one dead giveaway, if you're looking at a site, is if you dig into the soil, maybe 300-400 millimetres deep, and you see a mottled pattern in the soil, you see those different colours between the grey and the red colours like that. That's called mottling. That's a highly indicative of a soil that sits saturated for months in most winters. If you see that in a soil profile when you've dug a hole, chances are it's a wet soil. Thanks, Ian. Talked about cap drains. Here's a perfect example of cap drains. You see that water sat on the surface. Would you believe there's probably about 140 grams worth of drainage underneath there? You've got a whole bunch of laterals at 3 or 4 metre centres, and they've got sand grooves that are cutting through up to the surface to connect. A couple of problems with the sand groove. Ian's just showing you where the groove is. You see that layer of material on the top? That layer of material is a mix of sand and soil where the top dressing over the top of the surface has varied over time, and that has created layers of finer pores that are not letting that water through. So even though you've got this lovely clean sand groove underneath it, which is connecting into the drain, water can't get from the surface into the sand groove, into the drain, and you're sat with a wet field. So you have to be careful about what you do in terms of your maintenance of your drains. If you've got drains in like this, sand grooves or sand slits across it, you have to top dress with the same sand that's in the grooves or the same sand that's in the slits, or a coarser sand. If you put anything on that's finer, you're going to have problems. Thanks, Ian. Check your pipes. You know, sometimes one of the easiest things to do is to dig down to your drain, pour water in above the drain and see if the water goes. If the water goes into your drain, fantastic, it's moving. But sometimes that doesn't happen for whatever reason, but at least it tells you a story. Look at drains as they're installed. You see that pipe that's been pushed into another pipe? That's really bad practice. What soil will get in there, gravel will get in there, that pipe will block. Have a look at this other pipe that's been compressed. Why has that happened? Well, the trench has hit it. Probably the wrong drainage depth or something like that. But it's all affecting it. So check the condition of your drains. Thanks, Ian. Here's some new drains going in. This is a lateral drain that's being installed on a site, and then that's being connected to the surface by putting in closely setted sand slits. These sand slits are ½ metre apart, going in with a GKB machine. Fantastic machine, very expensive, of course, but it works really well. And if you put the same sand that's in that across the top as a dressing, maybe 10 mil, 15, 20 mil, whatever you can afford, that will drain beautifully. But if you're in a clay soil and we have a summer like we've just had, it can cause problems. Ian, can you move on? I'm going to come back to mold drainage in a minute. I'm scared of talking about mold drainage at the moment, given how dry the summer's been. Go on, keep going in. So what are the issues? Well, if you've got drains in a clay soil, as that soil shrinks, drain trenches will open up, the backfill, the gravel and the sand that's in those drains will drop, and you will lose your surface levels. I've known quite a lot of clubs this year who've really struggled with their outfields because the drains that are in there have all dropped, creating an uneven surface, which has been dangerous to play on. You'll see that big crack that's there, and I've seen a lot of outfields like this on heavy clay soils that are cracked, even ones without any drainage whatsoever, and they are difficult to manage. So how do you mitigate drain settlement? Well, one way you can do it is to, and I've got to be careful what I'm saying here because I'm hoping to get this tested out on a couple of sites soon, practically, to see if it really, really works. But one way you can do it, if you're brave enough, is to put lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of more slits across it. And if you put loads and loads of deep slits across your outfield, all of them will open up a small amount, but none of them will open up in the way that that hand is sticking down there. At least that's the theory. Maybe hold fire on that, and we'll come back to you after we've done some controlled trial work on this to see that it does work properly. The other way is you can, but it's ridiculous, it's too expensive for most clubs, would be to put a layer of sand over the top, and that sand moves as the soil underneath moves. But that's really, really expensive. And then the final one is to irrigate your outfield. Probably not an issue in Wales. Probably out of all the parts of the country, this is least likely to be an issue for you. But anywhere in the east, dry parts of the country, this is a massive, massive issue. Ian, can you pop back to those mold drainage ones?
Yeah, certainly.
So why have I mentioned mold drainage? Mold drainage is like a classic agricultural technique used on clay soils. The reason I've mentioned is because I'm really tight and I don't like spending money. And mold drainage is cheap as chips, but it can be an absolute disaster if it's done badly. It can be a disaster if you use the wrong mold plough. You see that little mold plough with a line through it? Nothing wrong with a mold plough, but the problem is that for sports turf, that's not going to work very well. You have to go deep enough with a mold plough so that you don't get surface heave. And the rule of thumb here is that the torpedo on the end of the mold leg has to be at least 6 times deeper than the width of that torpedo layer or that mold itself. So say, for instance, that mold there is 50 millimeters diameter. 6 times 50 is 300. If you go shallower than 300, the surface will heave and rip and you'll have a disaster. You'll have basically plowed up your field. So you have to go deeper than 300 if you're using something that big. Ideally 400. Then you'll get a beautifully confined mold channel with 0 heave at the surface. The other thing you need to do is have a cutting disc. That's the nice thing about that mold plough there. It's got a lovely disc at the front, so that's cutting neatly through the turf, and then the leg slot's going through it. For a mold plough to work, for mold drainage to be effective, the soil has to be at least 30% clay at the depth you're going to mold. So get into your outfield, dig a hole, take some soil samples out and get it off and sampled. The other thing you need to do is, say you're going to mold drain at, say, 350 mil, dig down to 350 mil, get a ball of the clay, so roll it into a ball in your hand, just like you would a motty, and then drop it into a glass of water. And if that's still there as a ball of soil 24 hours later, it was suitable for mold drainage. If it's collapsed and slumped, it's not going to work mold drainage. The joy of it is it's cheap. There's no materials to bring in, no pipes, nothing like that. But you do need to have some lateral drains to let it into. A spacing of 8 meters between your lateral drains is fine for mold drainage. If you've got a big ditch on one side, you can drain back from the ditch and let it all out into the ditch. But the downside is, if that's a heavy clay soil that shrinks significantly and cracks significantly, then those leg slots will open out massively and you will lose players down them. I promise you, you will lose players down them if it gets dry like it has this summer. There could be a fielder that long gone and all you'll see is the hands sticking out of this giant crack. So what you'll have to do is then sit it like bonkers, keep sitting it in every which way you possibly can, and those leg slots will not open out as much, but it remains risky. But in Wales, where it rains a lot more, far less risky than the southeast of England. I'd be reticent to recommend this on a clay site in the southeast or in East Anglia or somewhere like that, because I think there would be trouble. Ian, can you move on to the next one? This is an example of a field being mold drained. And look, it's a lovely, neat finish. What you tend to do is you will work at about 800-meter centers, so 0.8 of a meter, because that works really nicely with the wheelbase of the tractor. And what you want to do is, as you're putting a new mold drain in, your tractor goes over the mold drain that you've put in and closes that surface up. Because mold drainage doesn't work by water coming across to the crack and going down. What it works by is the actual legs that's going in and that metal torpedo creating a whole bunch of additional cracks within the soil. So it has to be relatively dry when you do it. Dry at the surface, but soft and wet at depth. And when it's done well, look at that. You can see the legs lock beautifully. You can see the mold channel perfectly. You could do a cricket outfield for maybe 7-8 grand. It's a bloke in a tractor. It's cheap. But if it goes wrong, it goes badly wrong. And you might not be playing.
How long would that last for, Alex? Just roughly, you know, is it a year? Is it 2 years? Or I know
in the right soils,
clay that's in there.
It does, and in the right soils, that will drain effectively for 5-10 years,
right.
15 years sometimes. If it's a soil that shrinks and swells, it just keeps regenerating the cracking, right. So it can keep working. If the soils are a bit marginal, you might have to redo it every 3 to 4 years. So, for instance, Hursley Park down in Southampton, down in Hampshire, Hursley Park do this maybe every 10 years. And on their site, it works incredibly well. I mean, unbelievably well. I've seen photos that they've sent me just after they had it mold ploughed the last time, and they had a storm of 80 millimeters on Friday night. The whole thing, literally the whole ground was underwater. The next day, there wasn't a drop of water to be seen. It's not as efficient as a sand-based system, but it's much cheaper. And if you can manage the cracking, very effective. Thanks, Ian. Mitigating drain settlements. So again, going through, putting more cracks in, use ground break, put loads of cracks in there. If you can, irrigate. Absolutely, you know, but I don't think many of us can afford to irrigate. And I've no idea why I put that other soil profile picture in, that drain picture. It looks nice though, doesn't it? It's a half decent drain. Sorry, Ian, yes, let's move on. And then the final thing is, where does the water go? You've got to have an outfall, and it comes back to what we were saying earlier. If you're lucky enough to have a ditch or a pond or something like that, you can let the water in, fantastic. Maybe you're on chalk. Would you going to be on chalk in Wales? Probably not. But maybe you've got a really permeable bit of geology, like sandstone or something, underneath your ground. A deep soakaway could work really well. You can install a deep soakaway and water into it. Maybe just a standard soakaway if you've got relatively permeable ground there, you probably won't need drainage. But in most drainage systems, particularly if it's going into a pond or a river or to a surface water drain or surface water sewer, you will need to attenuate the flow. And what that means is that if the water that normally leaves your site is, say, going at 3 litres per second per hectare, you won't be allowed to let it go at anything beyond that. And what that means is you have to put a flow restrictor into your outlet pipe and have enough space. It might be in the form of a pond, it might be in the form of a swale, it might be in the form of some crates buried underground to store the excess water and let it off. There's a whole bunch of design that needs to go into that to make sure you comply with the law, basically. So that's the first question. If I'm considering drainage, first question is there somewhere for the water to go? If you're surrounded by houses on every side, chances are you're going to struggle to find somewhere for that water to go. Lovely, thanks, Ian.
I just put this in. I just put a summary in here, Alex, just to sort of like recap what we've talked about. So, you know, identify your issue. So that would be digging your hole, and if the water goes in from the top, it's a surface water. If it's coming up from underneath, it's a subwater kind of thing. So it's just that kind of thing. Can maintenance be your best solution? It's usually your cheapest solution, so try that one first. If you've got thatch layers, what we talked about before, get rid of those. Do your cultural practices, your decompaction, your scarifying, your top dressing all beforehand. Like Alex just said there about the mold drainage, can be very effective. It is a lot cheaper than getting drainage in. If you do need to have a drainage system, make sure that you have everything done beforehand. So you've got a feasibility study, what is actually needed, and specification for your site, because all sites are different and the specification may have to be slightly different. There's not one fits all where drainage systems are concerned. it has to be for that particular site because all the grounds are all slightly different. And if you are going down the drainage, make sure you plan it and make sure that you get the right costs and you do understand not just how much it's going to cost to put the drainage system in, but how much it's going to cost to actually maintain it afterwards. One of our biggest issues that we find in our programme is when £100,000 worth of drainage system has gone in, you could be talking £10,000 to £20,000 per year to maintain it. If you can't afford the £10,000 to £20,000 per year, don't put the drainage system in and look at an alternative, basically. So just to recap on you know, and if you are in doubt, obviously, you can get a county pitch advisor out first to get you initial advice. But if it is something more detailed that needed, they will pass you on to somebody like Alex, a consultant or someone that could help you further. But ask for help if you're unsure. Please don't go out and just get a drainage system put in because the chances are 9 times out of 10 they won't work. So, and I think that is everything. So thank you very much indeed, Alex, for that. I think, Victoria, are you still there? Have we got any questions or?
I am still here. I don't think we have any questions in the chat. I don't know if anyone does have any questions. You're more than welcome to put them in the chat or take yourselves off mute to ask Alex or Ian any questions.
If anybody does think of any questions and they want to email, more than happy to, you know, get any questions if you think of any.
Yeah,
I'll always, you know, I'll answer them back. I can either get Alex to give me the answer and I'll answer them back.
It looks like Mike has a question.
Yeah,
right, I can't see everybody. Sorry.
Just a quick one. You mentioned scarifying of the outfield to get rid of the thatch.
Yeah.
You mentioned before the season. Is there any value in doing it at the end of the season, or does that just create a problem for moss during the winter?
I think you can do it. You can do it as long as the grass is still growing. Your biggest issue with scarifying out is if you've got a lot of thatch, it could bring out the grass as well. So you may have to overseed as well. So if you're doing it towards the end of the season, the overseeding may not take as, depending on where you are in the country. But scarification is also quite expensive. So just make sure that it's done when the grasses are normally growing is the best way to do that. Would you agree with that, Alex? Is there anything else?
No, I think that's right. I mean, I tend to do it in the spring because I tend to always overseed afterwards. That you're quite right. There is a risk that moss might get in there if the grass doesn't grow back strongly enough, or even weeds might germinate. So that is the big risk, really. But you know, technically, there's absolutely no reason why this time of year you couldn't go through, scarify it out like you do your square. And you know, as long as you don't go mad, I would say go easier at this time of year than maybe in the spring.
Okay, thanks very much.
Any other questions?
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Hi, Rob.
Hi, all right. I'm the groundsman of St Helens in Swansea, but I play my cricket on another council ground up in Morriston, and it was built on marshland over about 45 years ago. Now they put the drainage in to drain the marshland off. Then they laid the cricket square on top. But when we have the dry weather, you can see the drains running underneath the cricket square diagonally. And over the last 30 odd years up over the weather, a lot of the drains have started to sink. And then if you put a screwdriver into into them, then you can hear the crunch of the chippings underneath. Well, it's getting now that they're sinking quite a lot. And then when they cut a new wicket up there every time, you can see where the drains are sinking, because that bit of grass stays bright green when the rest of the wicket goes yellow colour. So some of them now are getting it, they're on a length now, and it's quite for some time in the future. I think games will have to be called off there because the ball, you don't know what's going to happen when it hits them, because sometimes rolls across the floor and it sometimes takes off. But how how can they make this better in the years to come? They, you know, top dress it every year, but it just with the weather we're getting now, hot and you know, dry and wet all the time now. It's getting worse, I would think.
I mean, there's only one way to truly deal with it, and you're not going to want to hear it, Robert. But that's to dig it up and get rid of them.
Well, it's just been done now by leveling off by a company now that have come in to do some of the squares in Swansea.
Yeah. I was going to say that's the alternative: is you level it off, and then you're really hard in terms of the quality control of your top dressing every year. So you get those loots on, and you make sure that they're filled in every year. There's no skimping or anything like that. So that every time you leave that after your renovation, it's absolutely spot on. That's the only way to manage it, that and pray that it doesn't keep getting drier. Because once those drains are there, they will continue to shrink year on year on year. Honestly, this year I've had people phone me up and say, didn't even know we had drains. We played here for 30 years, never seen drains, and this year we've seen drains. So yeah, if you really want to get rid of them, it's a new square, but that's ridiculous. So take the top off, get the levels right, and then really meticulous top dressing afterwards.
The other problem up there, because it's on a council, either side of the cricket square, 2 football pitches. Now, years ago, they were sand slitted, but as a local authority, and I work for the local authority, they don't spend any money on putting any more sand on a sand slit pitch, and it hasn't had any sand for at least 20 years. So I used to work on the site that is in question, but every time you used to spike it, the top inch would leave a tire mark when you get a certain, if it was getting wet, and underneath them will be hard. And then it takes so long for the water to drain off it because the sand slits lead into another drain, which has just been done by a drainage company. They've actually come and dug all the roots out of the drains they put a drain in.
Robert, sorry, I'm going to have to dive in just to say that I've got to go. So I'm going to have to leave this one to Ian.
Yeah,
right, Ian will be able to talk about this.
I can handle it. Thank you, Alex.
Lovely.
Really appreciate
Cheers,
it.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
No worries. Now.
So basically what Alex talked about before, Rob, is capping of the drains.
Yeah.
So what's happened is the reason why you have to top dress on a regular basis is to stop. If you put drains in, it's usually because there's a clay soil. It probably is in Wales, particularly that the clay will then cap over. So all that's happened over the years on that site is it's capped over. Then the top, I don't know, over 20 years, it might be the top 2 or 3 inches are really soft because it's holding all the water.
Yeah.
And then underneath is rock hard, basically.
Yeah,
and that's where your tire marks in. The way to do it is to try and clean it out, but then also try and get some spikes through that.
Yeah.
And try and get through so the water then can drain through. The ideal one, but again is expensive, is to strip off all the cap soil over the top, which isn't going to be done.
No, it's not.
It goes back to that what I just said before about if you are going to put a drainage system in, make sure you can afford to maintain it. And for many, many years, a lot of drainage systems were put in without maintenance being a consideration. Now you have to consider that on an outfield, that 100 ton of sand that you need every year or every other year to put on, you have to work out whether you can afford that or not. Because if you can't, within 2 or 3 years, they'll be none and void. They won't last the 10, 15 years, unfortunately.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Are there any more questions?
Like I said, I'm happy if anybody wants to send me any questions, in the next couple of days.
I think that's it. What I'll do now is we've been recording the session and I'm sure Ian will send his presentation to me and we'll share that with everyone at the beginning of next week. So thank you for your evening and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, hang on. Let me just take it off record.
I'm going to say, have you stopped recording?